I got 3 different stoves out here. It looks like 6, but there's really only 3 types. This is probably what y'all are most familiar with. This is a Tin Man, or what we affectionately call a Tin Man, and because it kind of looks like a Tin Man. And the idea is that it's a barrel within a barrel. And so that's this style. That's what these 2 are. This is a 5-gallon size, and this is a paint can size that will demonstrate. This right here is an annealer, what's called an annealer rocket stove. And the idea is that in third world countries, or here in America, or wherever you are, you can make biochar while you're cooking. So this is a cooking stove, and it makes biochar. And it's also a rocket stove. Okay, a rocket stove is an efficient, clean burning stove that utilizes chimney effect in order to burn fuel completely and entirely. So it takes a little with small pieces of wood. So there's not a lot of smoke going up into the air, because all that smoke is fuel that is being cast into the sky, greenhouse effect, all of that stuff I'm sure we're aware of. So rocket stoves are lit from the bottom, and this is a chimney that runs up through here. So the annealer stove, this is the retort. This is the inner barrel. Okay? And so this is filled with biomass. And let's step over here first. Filled with biomass. Put the lid on. Pretty fancy stuff here we're working with. And you start a fire. You start your rocket stove. It's lit underneath here. There's a hole in the bottom. The chimney draws the wood. This starts getting really hot. The gases and the heat transfer from the chimney into this outer drum, and they heat it up really hot. As that wood and that biomass gets hot, it starts to release its gases. I refer to what everybody knows from a campfire smoke. I refer to that as gases, just so you know. And those gases start to gasify. There's two or three holes on the inside of this chimney, and so because it has a lid on it, starts to build up a little bit of pressure, like your teapot, and it needs to go somewhere. It can't go out the lid, so it goes into those holes, and it's burned by the rocket stove fuel that's coming in. So that's an annealer type stove. This is what I call the Hillbilly Gasifier. Actually, at work, we don't have a lot of amenities out there. Taylor can tell you. He's been out there. We don't even have a microwave or anything. So we actually heat up all our lunches on this stove. Wow. We got a cast iron skillet, or we heat them up on the retorts when we're making biochar on a big scale. And so you can see this is. I got more char in here. This is 3 stoves, and this is a rocket stove. This is bare bones, as simple as it gets, rocket stove. And I love rocket stoves because they're so efficient and clean burning. So you take the outer can, the inner can, which is your chimney, and your apple pie filling can right here, or your tomato soup can, corn, whatever, and that becomes your feeder, just like that. Except this isn't an angle; this is perpendicular. And then you take the lid from your top, and you punch a hole in it. And you put out the 4 corners, and that becomes a concentrating ring, to where it concentrates the heat from the rocket stove onto where you want it, and it also becomes a little bit of a riser. See how it sticks up there about 1 inch, and that's where you can stick your can. This here is another retort. This gets filled with, well, you know what? We're gonna do this actually. So fill it with biomass.
Does it matter what kind of wood you use?
Yeah, feedstock is not species so much, but feedstock is really important in biochar. And if you're trying to make biochar for your garden, you obviously don't want to use pressure treated wood. You don't want to use painted wood. But other than that, everything you're going to find is going to be all right. And I use a mix of hardwoods and softwoods, but moisture content matters. So this wood right here is dry. As dry as it can be, really. moisture content when you're making biochar is important. You don't want it to be above 20%, because then all you're doing, half the time you're spending is it's driving off moisture. Before you can start to really pyrolyze, before you can really start to turn this biomass into carbon, you got to drive off all the moisture, all the volatiles. That's what the smoke and the gas are. Okay, if I took a sealed can, no holes in it, put a bunch of wood in it, and heated it up in my stove, my wood stove at home, what do you think is going to happen? Boom. Boom, exactly. That's like you take a teapot at your house, but you don't have a little convenient whistle, and it's just sealed. You know, you're making a steam bomb, a pressure bomb. So it is very, I can't emphasize this enough, how important it is to have a place for those gases, that smoke, to escape. And so there's just some 1/8" holes all the way around the bottom of this. So this, these holes are in the bottom too, on this, on the very bottom. You see, here's some charcoal that we made in this. This is, you know how glassy it is? Somebody was asking me about the temperature. When it starts sounding like glass, you got it up 850, 900 degrees Fahrenheit. It's hot. There's nothing in this. Nothing in that but carbon. That's it. Doesn't taste like, just tastes good. Cleans you out too. Alright, this is a chimney. It introduces secondary air at the same time, like an old carburetor, you know, in a truck or a motor. To burn that smoke clean. The whole idea is to burn it clean. At work I was taught 4 principles. Make the very best biochar possible. You heard that glassy stuff? That's good biochar. It's really pure. You don't want stuff that's, you know, half burned or whatever. Then you're just introducing a bunch of variables into your soil. Volatiles, really. The second rule is use as much of the process energy as possible. The third rule is to eliminate as much of the pollution from the process as possible, i.e. burning it clean. The fourth rule is make it profitable. And, you know, those are all great rules. And the fourth rule, making it profitable, for us as a company, means that we're going to succeed as a company. But we're doing something good at the same time. We're putting carbon that would go up into the atmosphere into the ground and stabilizing it. You've heard the word sequestration. We're sequestering carbon and waste. Okay, but for us, on this scale, profitability for me at my house is that, one, I can make barbecue fuel because I like to grill out, vegetables, meat, whatever. 2, I can make blacksmithing fuel, which I like to do too. And 3, I can make biochar, mix it with our compost, and put it into the soil in our gardens and have bountiful harvests, which is profit. I mean, we don't sell them, we eat it. You know, so the fourth rule is whatever your situation is. What's that?
Doesn't fall out.
Yeah, I put 2, when I build these things, I put 2 screws in them. I put one in the bottom and 2 in the bottom. One to hold the little can in, and one to hold it fixed in the center. So because they'll move all around. So what's this going to do? This is a clean burning rocket stove. You guys don't see any smoke, do you?
No.
That's great. But there's a lot of heat coming out of there, or there will be in just a minute. My tendency, because I get impatient, is to overfeed these things. And so you don't want to do that. You just kind of want to feed it slow and steady. Yeah, come on all around. We'll see this thing start to gasify pretty soon. Smoke is primarily 4 elements. Carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, and hydrogen. And when you get all of the condensable gases out of it, essentially, once you get all the moisture out and what's associated with the moisture, what chemically bonds with the moisture, you get very flammable gases. Methane is incredibly flammable. As you know, you go to the landfill and there's like, so they're burning it all over the place, which is really cool. Hydrogen, you guys know how much, See, we're already starting to gasify here. I gotta make sure this lid is on tight. which I didn't do. Or we're going to lose all our gas out the top. And you know how they say how chefs have really can tolerate a lot of heat on their fingers? Yeah, I can tolerate a lot more at this point in my life, which I'm not sure is a good thing.
It's those calluses.
Yeah, calluses. So you generally don't want to touch a hot pan. But that's another thing too, safety-wise. I got a bucket of water for two purposes. One, if I just need to like, something goes crazy and just like put it out. Fire hydrant and a fireproof blanket. Just thought I'd mention this.
Yeah,
the water too, the second purpose of the water is to quench the char. Okay, so while that's starting to go, and we can, you know, forget about it, right? I'll load up this Tin Man here. Here you go, another quart size paint can. I'm going to fill this with this stuff because it's dry. It works pretty good. Okay, that's starting to gasify. That's good. So what that means, gasify, is that wood inside that retort is heating up, and it's starting to burn. I can see it. I can see the little hole on fire.
How long does it take before you have biochar?
That'll take about 10 minutes, 20 minutes.
I'm trying to get an idea about volume in terms of for your garden.
Volume for your garden, that's a great question. Out of this can, this is a demonstration.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not talking much volume. If you're doing anything for your garden, you're not going to want to go less than that big drum right there.
Okay.
And that, so
how much do you mix in with your compost?
I like to mix 50-50. Wood is like 1/3 carb, 2/3 those volatile organics that I was telling you about that you burn off, tar, water, vinegar, acetic acid, oil. All that you're going to get for your garden is about 1/3. About down there left. It's just the pure carbon that's left. Our goal at work is to get our retorts up to 850 degrees. That means we know that there's nothing left in there but carbon. And so these they get that hot. And so like the old time colliers, like that you see pictures of in Britain and Ireland and stuff, they'd make these in Indians and in Africa. You see these that's where whole conversation we could go off about. They dig these big pits and they'd fill them with wood. They line them all in there with like a chimney in the center, and then they cover them with earth and sheet metal and all this stuff. And then they take a big tar, oily, soaked, tired, raggy looking nasty thing, and they light it on fire and they shove it down in there. And then they just let it. They have little vents on the side to let the fire get going. And then it is just a smoky, nasty mess. Alright. Okay, you guys see this? See how that smoke is fuel? See that pressure? That smoke kicking out, just burning. So all that smoke you see coming out of the chimneys is gas.
In your large retorts, at what point does the original stock burn out and the pyrolysis gas is just sustaining?
We at work we use so that's really starting to go now. That's good. Fairly clean too. This is all just kind of uncombusted gas, but it can only do so much. At work we use an Adam retort. An Adam retort was designed by a fellow named Chris Adam, and he traveled extensively in Indonesia and Africa and was seeing the plight of these charcoal mills because they're so dependent on charcoal for cooking and for fuel. And some of these not quite as technologically advanced countries. And so he came up with an idea, a retort that you can once this starts to gasify, instead of just turning that smoke and sending it up into the air, you reburn it like retort is. So there are these big boxes. It's a big, like, picture a cord of wood. That's how much they hold. Is a cord of wood. It's 4 by 4 by 8, and we fill them up with wood. This is what we have at work. This is what I do all the time. My day job. And you fill it up with wood, and the question that you have is, at what point does the retort, what point does the load or the charge, like in that can is what's called a charge, at what point does that run on its own gas? Like this, if I stopped feeding this rocket stove right now, this thing would just keep pumping out gas, and it's just burning on itself. It's just burning on its own right now. See? So the idea with the atom retort is that it gets up to a certain temperature, and it starts producing its own pyrolysis gas. I think it starts at 200 degrees. What do you get when you boil water? Before you boil water, you get steam. So you're getting all that steam first. You're driving off that moisture. But about 200, 215, 250, 300, 400, you really start to release some pyrolysis gases, Fahrenheit, and that's burnable gas. At between 250 and 400, you're starting to get it. Okay, at 700 degrees, you're getting real strong pyrolysis gas. I mean, that wood's just giving it all up. It's like, oh, I'm done. Oh, it's just throwing it all out. And so at work, we measure our gasifiers. We use a gasifier to start the retort process, which is a little bit different than the original atom retort. We use 2 of those boxes. 2, maybe 3 of those boxes. That tan box right there, that's what we use to measure how full our gasifier is. Our gasifier will take about 3 of those, 2.5, 3 of those. And if we can, depending on the load, a lot of it is load dependent, depending on moisture content and all that stuff. About 3 of those boxes in the gasifier will get that load cooking on its own gas. And we keep the gasifier running, but mostly just for secondary air. Our gasifier can introduce primary air, which is directly burning the wood inside, the biomass inside the gasifier to make this incredibly hot flame. We can get our gasifier up to 12, 14, 1500 degrees in like 10 minutes. You know, if everything's clean, everything's running good in there, I mean, it really cranks. So about 2 of those boxes will get the retort running on its own gas. And then we dial the gasifier back, because we don't need to burn that wood anymore, because the wood inside the retorts, the gas inside the retort, just like that, is pumping out, and we burn that instead. Alright, so I'm going to let this cook for just a little bit more to make sure all those gases are done.
So you were saying at work you stopped feeding the gasifier. When in that case is the gasifier?
Okay, yeah, see how it's still burning? That's good. At work, our gasifier is, it's loaded from the top. It's a sealed container where we load wood chips and that kind of stuff in the top. It's got a grate in the bottom. We light it with a blowtorch. We introduce primary oxygen to get that wood burning. And then so all the wood on top, all that dry wood, has to pass through a bed of coals and is pyrolyzed. And then there's a combustion chamber underneath. So the wood is introduced to the hot charcoal and it starts to release its gas, and then it's combusted in a bottom chamber where there's secondary oxygen introduced. So that just really gets it going. Alright, this is about done.
Can I put one of those retort cans on my wood stove inside?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So
you could take a paint stove, you could take a paint can like this, punch a hole in the bottom, please, and fill it with dry wood chips, and put it in your wood stove, and then let it go for a little bit. See what it does. Yeah. You can use wet wood. It's a pain.
But it might not cook all the way through.
And it might not cook all the way through. I mean, there's a lot of challenges with using wet wood. You never know, because every load is different depending on what you're charring. Okay. So I'm going to keep loading my can here.
So the wood where you work, you load that bottom chamber, the fire goes through channels underneath your retort, heats that up, and then the gas comes out of that and goes into your gasifier in the bottom.
Right, and it goes at our system at work, our atom retort at work. It goes through a condenser first. So all the gas that's coming out of here and burning, we run it through a condenser, and so we drop out all the condensable gases. What? That's the vinegar. That turns into what we call wood vinegar, and it's mostly acetic acid, about 80 to 90% water, tar, oil, all kind of crazy stuff. Really potentially beneficial stuff. I mean, it's like you see these trees and they're huge, and you're like, what we're doing is we're condensing the essence of these trees and into a stable liquid. And so they're having a lot of success in fighting the greening disease in Florida, citrus blights and all sorts of stuff. It's a great fungicide at strong concentrations. It's an herbicide. But at great dilutions, this wood vinegar, this is the condensed smoke, essentially this smoke condensed. It's at 100 to 1. It's a fungal food, and it's God, there's so many scientific terms that I have no idea what they mean and what they are. It increases germination in seeds as well. So it's one of those things where at one concentration it's a poison, on another it's a medicine. And so that market in America is just starting to be uncovered. They've been using wood vinegar in South Asia and in Europe for, it's decades old industry now. Longer than that. They've been using wood vinegar in Japan forever.
What's your company doing? Okay.
We're developing a market for it, is what we're doing. So, alright, is this thing still pumping out a little bit of gas. So when it stops pumping out gas, then we know there's nothing left in it. So we'll just
went out.
Did it just go out? Still, so I can still see a little bit.
So if your atom is all masonry?
Our atom is steel.
Really?
It's steel and high density, high temperature insulation.
Okay.
At work, it's called an atom retort. I don't have an atom retort here.
They're big.
Is that Adam ATOM or ADAM?
ADAM.
ADAM.
Yeah, the guy's name was Chris Adams, hence the atom retort. And so our boss bought the plans for it and modified them and turned them into what we have today. We have, so these are big boxes. They're about the size of, one of those trucks up there. And we have 3 of them that are tied together. So there's just when they all get going, there's just a tremendous amount of energy that has to be dealt with.
For greenhouses and stuff.
And yeah, we heat a greenhouse.
You were flaming before.
Right.
Flaming is it?
When it stops flaming, it's pretty much done. And so at work, there might still be a little bit of liquid or a little bit of gas coming out. Oh, see, this isn't quite done. We still had flammable gas in it. We'll put it back on the stove. No. But see, we still made charcoal. So that's charcoal, for sure. But that, that's still pure carbon, parts of it. All right, so that's one example. That's right. Yeah, a lot of the volatiles that are in the wood can digest it in compost. And
How do you break it up? Do you have to pound it or make it into fine, like?
Okay, so we would take this, right, and this is just what you do. This is one way you can do it at home. Alright, I know you guys don't like to look at this. Dump it in here. You want it to turn into dust, and then I run it through a screen. I would take this out. Usually I would dump it. And then run it, sift it. Whatever's big, I throw it back in there and pound it again. And I did a wheelbarrow full the other day in about half an hour. And this was as fine as I got it in this pounding machine thing.
Did you put it in a Vitamix blender? And
Sure. Totally. Corn, grist mill, something like that. You could do it. You could do that. So yeah, you can pass this around or come check it out. This is all just in the pounding, and what I do is I would take the retort here, and I would dump, I would dump not the whole thing, but a few shovelfuls in there at a time, pound it up, and then I'd dump that out through my through the sifter into my wheelbarrow. Take the overs, put them back in there, add a little bit more char, pound it up, and so I did probably 2 of these You guys eating the char back there? Okay. Don't eat too much now. There's a little barbecue sauce on it. Probably 2 of these in about half an hour I was able to pound. And so it's really important when you're making char like this, is that it can, when this is done, like a big load like this can reignite. And we've, it's actually, if the carbon's pure enough, like activated carbon, it's hygroscopic, it's hydro-loving, it's water-loving, and it'll draw in moisture, like if it's a foggy day, it'll draw in moisture to itself so quickly that it'll create friction, and that it will light itself on fire. Yeah, it's crazy. And then, so what we do is we introduce water immediately. At work with these big retorts, you know, like the size of the truck, we open them up, and we use a modified leaf vacuum, affectionately called the Billy Goat. And it's got this 10-inch tube and a 15 horsepower Subaru engine, and it's got a big impeller with a grinder on it. And so we hop into the retort, we chop it up a little bit with a shovel, and a dust mask. That's very important. Carbon is not something that you want a lot of in your lungs. And then we vacuum it out. Crank that engine and just whoa! It's so obnoxious. It's like the most obnoxious machine ever.
And it runs water?
And so, but we connect a hose to that, a garden hose, and it sprays through like agricultural sprayer nozzles. It sprays water onto the char as we're vacuuming it up. And so when it's vacuumed up, it's about the size of this, about ½ inch. Sometimes you get a little bit bigger. And then it goes into a bulk sack.
Is it muddy?
No, because we have the right proportion of water. It's sort of scientific, but definitely mechanically dialed in to where we introduce enough water to where it's not going to self-ignite, but it's not too muddy to where there's plenty of space left for the nutrients and microbiology that need to be added to that.
Could you put this in your water filter pitcher when you have the water, filter water? Would it be that kind of concept?
If you got it hot enough to where it's this real clinky, glassy sounding stuff, and you ground it up to about, I think water, the minimum particle size for water's it might be 1/16 of an inch. If you can get it that small. Right. That's another great use of biochar is that it's a filter. And one of the industrial uses that they've been doing with it is where a lot of farms, what they'll do is they'll sculpt their fields so they're all drained to one point. This is good practice anyway. I don't know if a lot of people do it because it's a lot of land moving. But they'll take biochar and they'll put it in like big sacks and perforated sacks, and they'll lay that biochar in the drain where all the water comes together, and so all the runoff, all the salts, all the everything, all the nitrogen runoff goes through that biochar filter before it goes into the water stream.
To make truly activated charcoal for like air filtration, it needs further steam treatment.
Yeah, activated carbon is steam clean. So there might still be some pores that are not fully cleared out if you make backyard biochar. Some pores of the carbon. I think this is a statistic I heard, in 1 gram of carbon, there's enough surface area to cover a football field of just tiny micro pore structure. So it's incredibly porous, and that's one of the physical benefits of biochar is that when introduced to compost or some other sort of nutrient or mineral microbiology, fungal, everything, all that good stuff you guys have all been talking about all day. It's the perfect habitat for it. And so if you just add that to your soil, if you just add that straight carbon to your soil, you're going to be like, what the heck, this stuff doesn't work. This is like, in fact, it's worse. Because what you did is you just added that carbon, and being a filter and a sponge that it is, so porous, it's going to take everything into itself, and it's going to hold it until it's full. And then it'll release it back in your garden. You'll be like 2 years later, like, wow, my garden's doing great. And so the idea is that once you have it all pounded and sifted and it's in a particle size that's going to work for you in your garden, then you need to introduce it to nutrients. And you need to fill it up with nutrients. Worm castings are great. Compost is great. Urine is great. Diluted pee is like a really, really great way to charge your biochar. Compost tea is a great way to do it too. And then once it's charged, put it in your garden. And, you know, don't put it in the rows, or in the beds. Yeah, you want it in the beds and the rows. You don't want it in the paths. You're going to want to use this stuff where your plants are going to grow, where your roots are going to be. You want to get it as close as you can to the root zone of your plants, so that it can
And your company
use it.
sells this ready to use?
I can't talk about that right now.
Okay.
No. yes, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, Chargrow LLC.
Chargrow.
If you go to the Fifth Season vendor booth, they're one of our collaborators. Distributors. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank
and you can buy it from them.
That sounds so much easier than making all that.
Tell you what.
But
When you're building the Tin Man setup, I guess what do you use to determine the ratio of holes on each of the containers to make sure you're getting the right mix?
Trial and error.
Yeah.
And there's some better facts out there. About the appropriate holes. Basically, you want a lot of primary, and what I've noticed is you want a lot of secondary. And what I end up, secondary air meaning primary air to draw through the chimney, secondary air to introduce to the gas, and try to burn it clean.
Secondary are the holes in the top.
Yes. This is the primary air because when you well, let me just go ahead and get this.
Is there a book that shows diagrams of things like this so we can build one?
I don't know.
Sure, if you Google it.
Yeah, if you Google charcoal retort or biochar retort, don't Google Tin Man. You'll find something that's not. I don't know what you'll find. But it's not. This is just a colloquial term that I've always associated with this. This style of retort. Eventually, it'll catch on. I guess I don't know. I'm not trying to get it to catch on. It's just how I've always known them. So just dial or if you get on the computer, just type in charcoal retort, and one of the first things that you'll find is one of these double barrel things. And so as far as scalability, I built this to do. If I did the big one, it would take about 4 hours to do from start to finish. And so this one takes about 30 minutes. It's almost 5. Shoot. We got 30 minutes.
It seems so labor intensive, even if your yield is better.
Yeah, and our atom retorts are very labor intensive too. We have to load them by hand. We have to unload them by hand. And the future of the industry really is in a continuous feed operation, which already exists. You have to. The labor is getting your feedstock to a usable size for the machine. Right now we can put slab wood in it. Cut 8 foot long, 3 inches plus thick, bark on it, whatever you want. It'll char. In a continuous feed you couldn't do that. But you could basically use wood chips, and you have a huge auger hopper system, and it feeds. The continuous feed systems that I've seen, the auger feeds it. It looks like a big cement mixer with a drum on the center, and it's spinning, and there's some sort of gasifier that gets the process started. Part of it's a drying process to where it dries the moisture off before they start to pyrolyze or enters into the pyrolyzer, the actual char-making machine. And then it just turns around, and you put wood chips in one end, and you get biochar out on the other end. And then there's some guy there that makes sure that the hopper stays full of wood chips and that the gasifier's going, I guess. We have, our boss has one of those that we're working on. I mean, the batch process, we have 3 guys that work full time.
Maybe with doing a bamboo stand for the biochar?
Making biochar out of bamboo? No. No, I know that's getting to be a real thing, and I just read about this the other night. There's a lady in Australia that's has a lot of. She's using exclusively bamboo, and she's filling the top of the bamboo with chicken litter, and then putting it in her pyrolyzer and making biochar out of it. Really interesting. That's on the IBI website. I don't know if y'all are familiar, but there's an International Biochar Institute, and they are what the name implies.
When you burn bamboo, they're insects.
Yeah.
It's like a bomb.
It'll explode. Yeah.
They have to dry it. They have to dry it. This is that's one of the things that they said is that it has to be thoroughly dried, air dried, and then they inspect each piece before they put it in. And if it doesn't have a crack in it, like because bamboo cracks when it dries, they drill a hole in it. Yeah, and it's a truly renewable type of feedstock.
It takes a lot of man.
In my experience, the smaller the wood is, the easier it is for the wood to give off its volatiles, to give off its gases. So if you know, if a piece of wood is this big, like this stump here, there's a lot of volatiles down in the center of that stump. And it's going to take a lot of heat to get that out. I mean, it's going to take a lot of sustained energy to get that out. But a piece like this, doesn't take that much. And so, you know, when we're loading our retorts at work, you know, whoever has the late shift, we take shifts. You know, somebody comes in at 6 and somebody stays until it's done. And, you know, when we're loading them, either the day before or that day, we're like, oh man, don't put that in there. You know, it's just like this big old hunk of a piece of slab wood, and we know that it's just going to take, hours to cook through that.
So the continuous feed machine is almost instant because it's like sawdust.
Yeah, it's like flash paralysis. That's another thing is flash paralysis, where they'll take like sawdust and like really fine particles and pyrolyze those. And those work on a similar type of rotary method, where because you can't just pack in a bunch of sawdust because that'd be even worse than this stump. You know,
It's for liquid biochar.
right. You have to like blow it through a pyrolyzer.
If the wood turns to ash, then the composition of ash in your compost, is that okay?
It's separate.
Well, the ash, you don't want ash. I mean, a little bit of ash is okay.
A little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, if your container is sealed, then you shouldn't get ash. Like there's very little ash in the bottom of that big drum over there. Okay, so now.
Is there anything for ash at all?
Yeah, it's sweet. They say it sweetens the soil. So that's kerosene. That's not lighter fluid. Just so you know.
So once you feed that with fuel, that's the only fuel? You don't have to keep adding fuel to that?
No. Okay, so now, moving on. Whoa. Tin Man. So the retort, the airtight vessel. This is the airtight. This is the outer drum, right? Outer drum. This is the airtight vessel, like in this example here. So this is what's filled with char, right? And it's got a hole or two punched in it. And I fill this with that biomass. This is how much biochar I got out of this load. This little can. And if you're a small gardener, I mean, that's significant, you know. I don't know how well this is going to operate. We'll see. I've only done it twice, or second time. So this is the charge. You fill this with your biomass. You saw me fill the little can, just like I did on the Hillbilly rocket stove. I put this in, right? And the fuel that gets all that going is what I put on the outside. You know, I pre-cut these at home to fit inside that paint can.
And that retort, I guess, it sits right on the bottom of that?
Yeah, it sits flat on the bottom.
There's no holes under that?
There's no holes on the bottom of this one.
No, the inner.
The inner one, there's a hole in the bottom. There is, I put some holes in the bottom.
How's it stay flat on this?
Because it's not like pressed up against, and because there's a little bit of pressure, it's going to just push its way out.
Oh, but there's holes around.
And I got holes on the side too. Okay, so the same process that I did, you'll do with a bigger one. And so this right now, I'm just gonna kind of let this get going. And as this wood burns, all right, I'm gonna need more of my gloves for this. It's gonna start to heat up that inner retort, and it's gonna release its gases. And where are they gonna go when they release? But inside to the fire on the outside, and then they're burned. And so this process, like the second rule, can be very clean. It's hard to get it quite as clean in such a small scale, but that drum, I've done the 55-gallon Tin Man without hardly any smoke ever. You don't even, I mean, it burns so clean.
Just a woof.
Yeah, just occasionally there'll be a woof, you know.
How many burns are you getting out of the 55s before they feed through?
Oh, like 10 or 12, maybe more. The inner drums are the ones that go quicker. This is some biochar that is inoculated. It's all cool. Okay, so this has. Yes. Yeah. So this sat in compost and it was filled. So you guys can pass this around too. So this is really good looking stuff, right? And if you look at it, you'll see that there's little bits of carbon in there. You can squish it with your finger. You see how glassy they are.
So then for it to load, how long does it sit in that compost?
Longer the better. But really, it doesn't take a whole lot of time. I mean, if you do it, and especially if you do a liquid inoculation, like with a tea, or like I was saying, if you pee on it, that's almost instant, you know. All right, so what I want to do with this lid is try to get it cleaned up. Where's my glove?
It's on the thing. Right to your right. To your right.
But not a year.
Not a year.
Just putting the raw charcoal in the
Right, and so. Okay, good.
days, weeks, hours,
Weeks.
weeks.
Yeah, and if you put it in, I mean, it depends on how active your compost pile is too. Because you guys see the flames coming up the top, a little bit. There we go. See, when we get that gust of wind. Yeah, let me get this.
So you're introducing more secondary air just for the beginning?
I'm more secondary air than I can actually get in that little retort. Yeah, so this is one of the micro tunings that you'll learn if you do a Tin Man, is that when it gets going, I mean, you see the flame coming out the top, but it's producing more gas than this has space to burn. There's just not enough room for it to burn in here. But it will burn a little bit cleaner if we add more air. Okay, so there you go. And we'll just let that sit and do its thing. So now I'm gonna go to work. I'm gonna go feed the kids or the goats or whatever. And this is pretty much set it and forget it.